Hey guys, Happy New Year from your pal VC. First of all, no, my collaboration with Murray Reactions on the Top 10 Best Three Stooges episodes has not been cancelled, it's just been slightly delayed because he's super busy. Anyway, can you guys believe it's been over 20 years since Finding Nemo came out? You know, in hindsight, maybe I should have done this video last year, to commemorate the 20th anniversary. Oh well, early January of the following year isn't half bad. Anyway, we all remember falling in love with this movie for its likable characters, engaging story, and cliched but effectively executed message on not being overprotective. All this contributed to it being the highest grossing animated movie for over 6 years, and today makes us so long for the days when Disney and Pixar were some of the best storytellers in the world. Although I am getting really tired of people blaming their new woke direction on their movies sucking. Yeah, being inclusive isn't the reason for their decline in quality, it's just an unfortunate coincidence that they stopped putting effort into their stories around the time they decided to step up with the diversity. Well, that's an issue I'll go more into when I do a top 10 video for one of Disney's most woke works that also happens to be highly acclaimed. But back to Nemo, if you're a Disney expert like I am, you may know how Nemo didn't quite win everyone over. A French children's author named Franklin Calvez complained Disney had pulled another Kimba the White Lion with Nemo, namely by plagiarizing his new book, Pierrot le Poisson Clown, which translates to Pierrot the Clownfish. So he sued to try and get a share of Nemo's profits, but the jury and judge ultimately decided the similarities weren't enough to constitute plagiarism. Though, for some really strange reason, Le Calvez ended up having to pay Disney money for copyright damages. Yeah, that's a little confusing. But this video isn't to look over said legal proceedings. Today we have to ask the question, is this another case of Kimba the White Liar, or did Le Calvez possibly overreact a bit to the similarities? You have to know that this is not the first time Disney and Pixar have been accused of being copycats. No, people have indeed found more than a few similarities with quite a few of Pixar's movies, one of which I did a video myself on regarding the similarities between Toy Story and Jim Henson's The Christmas Toy. On top of that, it would be kind of hard for an obscure children's book author to win a case against an animation giant like Disney and their oodles of money and lawyers, so I was very curious as to whether or not Le Calvez overreacted regarding small comparisons, or if J.K. Rowling used the same lawyers to fight Jill Murphy over the Mildred Hubble and Harry Potter debate. Only one problem. For some reason, the internet was pretty vague regarding the actual plot of Perrault. When someone would go into details with the plot, the most they'd say was that it started very similarly to Nemo, with Perrault losing one parent to a predator at the beginning and being separated from the other for the majority of the story, and he encounters a shrimp like Nemo and a fish who looks like Dory, and that was really about it. And there were a few illustrations posted online, but not enough for me to piece together the story, so I waited patiently for years and years, hoping someone would elaborate on whether Disney or Le Calvez was in the right, but alas, no one ever did. So I realized I was just gonna have to find out the answer myself, got a copy of the book on Amazon, spent about an hour and 40 minutes transcribing the French text into Word and pasting into Google Translate. And by the time I was done translating and reading the book, I just had one thing to say about the matter. Coincidence? I think so. Yeah, I was disappointed to find that I can kind of see why Disney won the lawsuit. The plots of both works really don't have much in common, and even with the similarities they do have, like losing a parent to a predator at the beginning and being separated with the other, they're executed pretty differently. The plot of Perrault honestly has more similarities with The Land Before Time. And if you've been wondering for years about said plot like I have, I'm happy to tell you that your wait is finally over, because I'm going to be the first person online to go into detail with the plot of this book and show why I side with Disney in this case. So let's dive right into it. Okay, so here's a noticeable difference. Both Perrault's parents are alive at the start of the story, as opposed to Nemo, whose mom died before he was even born. So he asks his folks why they live in an anemone, and they explain it's to keep them safe from predators, which is demonstrated not long afterwards when it ends up saving Perrault from a hungry scorpion fish called Leona. Leona vows vengeance, but the family has nothing to fear with their underwater version of an electric fence. Which brings another noticeable difference, namely that while the Barracuda and Nemo appear to be one of the few non-sentient sea creatures in the movie, nor do they even have a name, Leona is completely self-aware and honestly pretty cold-blooded in how she talks. Well, all good things must come to an end, unfortunately, as a traveling starfish happens to pass by said anemone and decides to have it for lunch. Hey, look on the bright side, could have been nematodes. But with their home now too damaged to protect them, Leona seizes the opportunity in a heartbeat, and Prose Pop tries his best to fend the beast off, but with the same results as Nemo's mom Coral. Though it does buy Perrault and his mom enough time to get into a cave Leona can't fit into. And this is where I think the biggest difference in the execution with the similarities to Nemo lies. Remember how Marlin spent the entire frickin' movie traveling across the Atlantic Ocean, battling all kinds of dangers and overcoming his fears as a worrywart because his love for his son was stronger? Here they find an escape in the cave that's too small for Perrault's mom, and she's like, well, you're big enough to find your own place. You go find an enemy, I'll stay here where it's safe. Bye! Yeah, I definitely raised an eyebrow at this. If the scorpion fish had busted into the cave and was charging after them, I would totally understand why she'd want him to go and leave her. But there is no freaking reason for them to have to separate here, and it kind of feels like she's booting her son out like a parent whose adult kids are mooching off of them. Even if she does give the "I'll be with you even though you can't see me" speech we saw in the land for a time, I can't help but wonder if maybe the undersea laws dictated she get a bigger insurance payout if people thought both her husband and child were killed. I hear Marlin got a pretty hefty sum when his other 399 kids were eaten. Man, please remember the dumbass who writes the laws of the sea. So Perrault's on his own now and has to find his own place, and despite being abandoned by his own mom, he can't help but have sweet dreams about his folks that night. And the next day he meets a fish named Arthur.
For every do, there is a fro, for every stop.
No, not that one. Annie's the closest thing the story has to a Dory prototype. Anyway, Perrault's still grieving and thus sulking about how everything around him is so dull and bleak, and so Arthur basically says,
just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming.
And more importantly, appreciate this beautiful ocean atmosphere they're in, and sure enough, they find a new enemy for Perrault. That's already occupied by another clownfish. And said clownfish tells Perrault he's not interested in having a roommate and to piss off. Though considering how he looks like Charles Manson with fins, maybe that was for the best. But Perrault's alone and homeless again. So while hiding in a cave when Leona returns, he finds a family of mandarin fish who reveal that a good place for him to settle down might be a utopia called the Great Valley. Sorry, I mean the Anemone Gardens. Only downside is that Leona's home happens to be a trench she has to cross to get there. What are the odds? So the mandarin fish mother, called Anna, says she knows someone named Victor who's eccentric but can probably help him. But since Victor turns out to be just a literal shrimp, Perrault's understandably a little skeptical. This offends Victor, who pretty much says, okay, screw you, kid. But when Anna explains his predicament, he softens up. And we learn that while Victor may not clean tanks like Jacques the Shrimp, he does have a butler-like job of being a backscratcher to the Morail Queen Mina, whom he figures can eat Leona to allow Perrault to get to the Anemone Garden. And she agrees, though not out of kindness, but simply because she hasn't eaten anything in 2 days. But when Mina doesn't arrive at the designated time to do so, Perrault gets impatient and decides to just take his chances and cross the cavern, with expected results. But thankfully, Mina shows up just in time, and Perrault finally reaches the Great Valley. I mean, again, the Anemone Gardens. And guess what? His mom just happens to be there. The two have a teary-eyed reunion, where his mom claims she's been looking everywhere for him.
Yes, son, I found 3 sharks, a bloodthirsty angelfish, psychedelic jellyfish, and even a bunch of sequels to find you with the help of this blue tang who has short-term memory loss. I went through all that for you, son. But maybe it would be best if you hide tomorrow when the insurance agent lobster comes around. Why, Mom? Oh, no reason. It's not like I made a huge investment in an Atlantic Ocean cryptocurrency, and the only way I can pay for it was with the life insurance check coming tomorrow. Hey, did I tell you I was swallowed by a whale too?
And after his mom meets his new mandarin fish friends, and he shows off some tricks he learned from Arthur to his new clownfish neighbors, we've reached what the French call le fin. Pun definitely intended there. So yeah, not what I'd call plagiarism, Le Calvez. I mean, I guess there's a chance Disney may have been partially inspired by this book, but nowhere near at a level that infringes copyright. It's kind of like Family Guy and The Simpsons. One product takes the very basic setup and characters of the other, but then goes in an almost completely different direction with it. Plus, I've done some more research, and I found the reason the Kelvis had to pay a fine to Disney was because it was allegedly discovered that he knew about Nemo prior to Perrault's publication, and he wrote the book solely as a scam to get a copyright infringement settlement from Disney. The Calvis denies this and insists he initially pitched Perrault as a French animated film in 1995, but was rejected by French animation studios. And for the record, I think he's innocent. I mean, had that been the case, I think Le Calvis would have tried to make the story closer to Finding Nemo to how our IMC could point fingers at with Disney. Plus, didn't the court already agree that the similarities weren't enough to warrant copyright infringement? So now, just because he allegedly knew, you suddenly decide they do warrant it? That kind of feels like biasing. Well, you get my stance on the matter. I don't think it was plagiarism on either party, and really was a complete coincidence. But looking back on it, does Pierrot's adventure come anywhere near as close to the surface as Nemo's did? No, I really didn't think so. For one, where Nemo's clearly written for both kids and adults, Pierrot is clearly written just for kids. I will give it credit, the illustrations look incredible, and it did have a pretty intimidating villain, but it's pretty run-of-the-mill overall, and again, just kind of feels like The Land Before Time with fish. Finding Nemo was a dramatic coming-of-age story about overcoming your fears, and how there are better ways to keep your past from happening again than avoiding the present altogether, because that's ultimately bound to have worse results. And with its fun characters, pretty intense imagery for a G-rated film, and of course,
just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming.
That's exactly why it remains one of Pixar's most beloved films. As for Pierrot, I can't really say buying a copy and spending 2 hours translating it like I did is worth it if you want a charming foreign picture book about fish to read to your kids. You'd probably just read them The Rainbow Fish instead, which already has an official published English translation, and more importantly, a lot more heart. But if you want to go to the trouble anyway, I'm sure your kids will like the story fine, and you can't take peace of mind from reading it that Disney didn't rip off one of their most iconic characters from it. But yeah, when comparing the two stories, Nemo's definitely the one who for future generations will
just keep swimming, swimming, swimming. What do? We swim, swim.
Dory, no singing.
Want to swim, you want
See,
to
I'm gonna get stuck now with that song. Now it's in my head.
Sorry.